I'll be going over a very kind of what I consider a useful workflow for taking content that's maybe originally authored in SketchUp. There's no available Revit family for that, and frankly, we don't want to spend the time to recreate it in a native Revit family file. However, we really want to use this very specific piece of furniture in our design and in our visualization. So, really, like most Revit content, we have kind of two things we need from it. We need the ability to fully manage the content, meaning we can dimension to it, we can tag it, we can rotate it, move it in space, right? So we have all that full control over it. And then the second is that we want to be able to visualize this piece of furniture using like a real rendering and real sort of visualization capabilities. So I have a blank project file set up, and if I go to architecture component, place component, and I place this desk represents everything I would want from a working furniture item in my model. By placing it, we can see that it schedules out, it has a type mark, it has whatever fields I include within my schedule, right? It's responding to that because Revit understands that this is a piece of furniture. And I could say annotate a tag by category, and it would pop up, and that's everything I want. So let's say now I have this piece of furniture in SketchUp, as shown here. I grabbed this from Herman Miller, and what I did is it comes downloaded from Herman Miller, just kind of in black and white. So I applied materials to it, and we're going to talk about the relationship between materials in SketchUp and Revit in a moment, but this is what we're working with. So the goal is to get this inside Revit so that it will work fully inside Revit. So the first temptation may be to say insert, and we're going to say import CAD. And I can say, oh, here's my chair, open it, place it. Okay, so far I can fully move it. I can adjust it. It's kind of working, right? If I open up Inkscape, and where is the chair? Okay, let me go to a 3D view and say zoom to fit. There we go, there's the chair. And if I open up Inkscape, there it is. So we might say, okay, this is kind of working to some extent. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, who knows? But it's not really acknowledging it as a piece of furniture. As we can see, it's not actually scheduling it. So just doing a straight import is not really a valid way of working. What I'd recommend doing instead is saying File, New, Family. And I'd recommend starting with this family template. And I'm going to select Furniture. And the first thing I want to do is I want to say Manage Materials. And I recommend just deleting all of these out. And the reason for that will become very apparent in a moment. So I delete these materials out, and we can see I have 0 materials in the model, in the family file. So I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to say Insert, and I'm going to say Import CAD, just like I did before, and I'm going to select that SketchUp family and say OK. And maybe center it if I want, kind of whatever you want to do there. And voila, I have that. It's showing. And the real thing here is if I go to Manage Materials, we can see I get a list of materials. Now these material names are going to be whatever I define them as in SketchUp. So if I went to model or materials in model, which I'm not. There we go. In model, we can see that wood veneer 1, that's that. Metal seamed is this, and then this is just Herman Miller gray. Those names, right? So, and this is where I want to be a little bit careful of how I name things in SketchUp, are the exact same names now that show up here in Revit. I can always rename these as well. So I could call this HM seat and back. Really, whatever you want to name this so that you know what it is will work. And then what can happen too, sometimes when you're importing this, you don't really know what materials go with what. So what I'll do often is I'll change each one of these to some really bright color just so I understand like what material or what pieces of geometry are being affected by that. Then click apply. Okay, so I can see like this all turned green so that like my HM seat and back is green. This metal seam, if I didn't know what it was, I could change it to a pink. Say okay, and I'm like, okay, like I'm beginning to understand now how some of this is interrelated. Now, this is going to tell me just what the relationship is between the materials and the geometry. It's not going to influence things any more than that. It's just going to tell me what the relationship is, and that's why it makes sense to really name these in a very intentional name. And I could make it a little bit more sophisticated than that if I wanted to. I'm not going to worry about that. I just want to know what materials go with what, and then I'm going to name them again in a logical name that I know what they are. So I know the metal seamed is that color, so I'm just going to rename this HM metal 1. I would probably normally name it the furniture, the name of the furniture and the material name, but for this example I only have one, so I'm only going to do that. And I don't really know what that's going to, and some of these other materials probably go to other random things. I probably need to investigate the model a little bit further too to understand like what's happening with some of this faceting. So I really want to make sure that my model is very clean in SketchUp. Sometimes too we can do this partial explode and it will help, but in this case it gets rid of the entire model, which is not what I want. So anyhow, once I know what materials go to what pieces of geometry, I would say File, Save as Family, and I'll just call it HM Chair, call it whatever you want. And now when I load it into the project, okay, it comes in. This feels very similar to my import. There we go. We can see those funky colors are coming in, but that's okay. That's going to aid me in a moment. And now I can also say annotate tag by category. And it's actually responding as if it's a piece of furniture because Revit acknowledges it as a piece of furniture. If I went to the schedule, we can see that it's scheduling out. I'll just name this A. We'll say okay. There we go, A. Now, my next step, now that this is working properly as a piece of furniture, I probably want to do something about these funky colors, and I really want it to render properly. So I went to Manage Materials. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do, this isn't a necessary step, it's just going to help me in describing this. I'm just going to purge unused elements. And now if I go here, it should only have the ones that are really in use here. But anyhow, it didn't really update. Nonetheless, I see HM seat and back. Seat and back is the green. HM metal is this purple. So we're good there. So what I want to do now is swap this out with a proper PBR asset and material. I'm not going to go into what PBR materials are now. That's kind of a separate explanation. But I'll just make it the cherry so it's super obvious, and now I'll change my graphics to use the rendering appearance. We can see how that updated. Same with the metal. I'll make this a metal. Let's see here. I will make it this aluminum glossy. Click apply. And same thing. I'll change my use render appearance for my graphics there. And we can see now it is like changing. So now I can actually manipulate things inside this because it's a proper family for one. And now if I go to my rendering, open up Inkscape here, we can see that it's actually rendering out. It's like the material needs a little bit of work, has some pretty bad repeat on it, and we can see how this is updating. So we can see it's like that. If I wanted to change the legs to a different material, that can be done just by going in here. And let's see here. What if I changed it to something? Let's just make it, let's see, a different type of metal. Sure, I'll go for this blue. Now update the asset. Click done, click apply. We see it updated there, and then it should update. In my rendering, we definitely see it's more of a blue material. So there we have it. That is, sorry, I want to kind of get that back into view. Don't need this, don't need that. But that is how we can use SketchUp geometry that's native to SketchUp and work with it in Revit to create those capabilities of being able to render it out, being able to schedule it, being able to tag it, being able to move it, being able to really treat it like a piece of furniture without too much work on our end. This is also a good way to collaborate with other individuals that may be a little bit more proficient in creating furniture inside of SketchUp, but not necessarily Revit. And yeah, there can be some drawbacks. Like we could see that it feels like kind of over in here there's like chips out of it, and that just has to do with the material texturing in SketchUp. So yeah, that'd be things to refine in SketchUp before kind of bringing it back over. However, that is the workflow and how to do this. So I believe this was useful, and yeah, happy to share this workflow.